get a bit
Well,
so
hello, and a very warm welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show. And I'm delighted to be joined yet again by the brilliant Mike Batt. Last time we left off, we were talking about the Wombles and your glorious wardrobe malfunctions and an iconic story, which is now going to be part of the addendum to your brilliant book. Apart from the Wombles, you also write the iconic song Bright Eyes for Art Garfunkel. What's the story behind that song?
well, that is was a lovely commission. I was asked by the American producers if I would write a song, which I thought was a great opportunity. It was again, it's part of the relationship of, we some of us talk, and I have in my book sometimes negatively about record companies, and you have to sometimes drag them kicking and screaming towards success and all of some bad deals and things like that. But also, there's lots of lovely people in record companies, and one of the advantages of being signed by for publishing with Sony was that they would actually sometimes put work my way, and it was they who suggested that the producers might like to speak to me. And the director said to me, I'd like you to write a song about death." And I thought, that's such a hard subject. How are we going to do that? And I went home, and this was after the Wombles had happened, and I, I didn't know that he really wanted any songs in his film. He wanted it to be an adult film. He didn't want it to be a Disney type film, which was quite an ambition considering he was going to do a line drawing animation. It wasn't, it was rendered in a way that made it look like a Disney film, albeit a very aggressive, and sometimes some people find it scary. I find it, quite. In some ways, it's quite an ugly looking film. There's quite a lot of, isn't there? A lot of people said when they were kids, they were
Yeah.
scared to bits by it. But they wanted a song, say, about death. Now, I didn't want to write a song just about darkness and death and loss. There's enough of that going on, and without writing songs about it. But in my mind at that time, but I did want to write about it, and I thought, you know what, to myself, I'd said, hey, one side of my brain said the other, whatever. Um, it's actually the most important thing we think about. The question is, what happens when we die? Do we, all religions are based on, do we live on? Don't we? Do we get recycled? Do we come back again? So I thought, what's the opposite of death? Well, is life, and what is life personified by? Well, or indicated by was the brightness of one's eyes. It wasn't until many years later when I saw my dad just shortly after he died, and his eyes weren't bright. They were like marble, alabaster. There was nothing. He had left. He'd gone. It was just a body. Sorry about being graphic, but the person who's alive has usually got a bright twinkle in their eyes, or you can, an awful lot of information is given out about how you feel through your eyes. And so I thought, bright eyes. I was just sitting at the piano, and literally, and in fact, I found, and so I digress in the way I predicted I would. I remember reading, not before that point, but after it, some years ago, recently, Paul Simon said that his best songs come to him where he's sitting with the guitar, and then the tune and the little hook line or whatever it might be, lyrics come at the same time. Because the biggest question that people ever get asked is, what comes first,
Yeah.
the music or the lyrics? And the answer is different. Elton and Bernie work differently. Tim and Andrew work differently. We all work differently. I happen to write both, so I usually I'm a bit like the Paul Simon way. I'm sitting at the piano, suddenly I think, bright eyes burning like fire. I literally thought that, and I thought, that's not bad. I'll just write that down. And I write on manuscript paper. I don't have a tape running. I literally scribble like mad, like a sort of latter day would be Mozart with a ballpoint pen instead of having to scratch out everywhere. Anyway, so I wrote that down and built the song around it. Is it a kind of dream? floating out on the tide. It was a song of wonder, wondering what happens. I wasn't giving out any answers. In fact, quite the opposite. I was asking the question, what happens? And I had to ask it in lyrics, which could be, I know, don't laugh, or do if you want, could be sung by rabbits. Well, of course, it's not rabbits singing it. And it's not actually really rabbits thinking it, it's human beings, because the whole film is analogous to human life and struggle and every other being's struggle and relationships and stuff. So I just wrote it as a human thinking, what happens when you die? And so, but I had to do it in language that rabbits would know. So the wind in the trees, the grass. I didn't use the word grass, but there's a fog along the horizon. A few people have asked me what a foggle is since then. What's a foggle? This is one on the horizon. There's a foggle on the horizon. So anyway, to me, I had to use nature, ideas from nature. So following the river of death downstream, is it a dream? So I couldn't write, just past the newsagents where they've got the news of the world on special offer. You couldn't write that in. Not that I would write that; it's not a very good lyric. But had I thought of wanting to do that, I couldn't have put it into the thoughts of a rabbit. So it all had to be pastoral kind of images, and so that's how that song came about. And like most of them, most of those songs that did really well are the ones that were going to fail. No one played it on the radio, it's too slow. Eventually they did. We got one TV. I went on Saturday Swap Shop because I knew them because I'd written the Swap Shop theme. Swap Shop, da, 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 da. So I rang up and said, "Do you mind do me a favor? Can I come on TV and plug my record?" Yeah, sure. And I went and chatted to Noel Edmonds and gave out a prize for some swap thing. And they played a little bit of the Rabbits thing. And we went from literally, got to be about probably 100 records a day to 60,000 records. I sound like that bloke on The Chase.
Yeah.
60,000 records a day. The Dark Destroyer, that's it. What's his name?
Bradley Walsh, you're thinking of?
No, the Dark, he calls himself the Dark Destroyer. He
Oh,
used to be
right.
a
Okay.
Barry.
Okay. Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
Yes.
Sorry for listening or watching. Anyway, he says the amount that he's offering, and then he goes 60,000. Well, anyway, we did 60,000 records a day, not just I mean, that's enough to get even a week would be enough to get you in the top 10. But anyway, went straight to number one and stayed there for 6 weeks and became a hit in I think something. Well, it certainly became a hit in more than 10 countries, but I think it became certainly top three and number one in about 8 other countries.
And it is amazing the sort of power of television and selling records on that sort of. Sean Wallace is the guy's name, I think, the Dark Destroyer.
That's right,
What
Sean.
you're thinking
Yeah.
of him, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Apologies, Sean.
yes, and no, but it's fascinating because now record sales are so tiny, aren't they, with streaming and so on and so forth, and artists getting their money in a different way. And obviously, it's peanuts, isn't it, in terms of
It
record
is.
sales now? And the industry's gone that sort of cyclical thing. It used to be you do your tours to promote the records, and you make all your money on the records. Now the records sort of promote the tours, don't they?
Well, they do if you tour. I don't. So, and a lot of people don't. And uh, if we're getting into the minutiae of it, a lot of artists have passed on and have left their estates to their kids, which is why we have a copyright law that takes you past necessarily sometimes your death. In fact, in every case with writing, as you know, copyright the length of copyright protection goes to 70 years beyond the death of the composer or lyricist and lyricist. And in terms of recorded music, it's 70 years since the recording date. So Anyway, I'm sure you need me to tell you that, but perhaps your listeners might be interested.
Yeah, and I think it's important because it's going back at those sort of rights and so on and so forth. And it is
Yeah.
interesting, and that's why getting the rights right is so important. Getting proper advice makes a lot of sense. And as you yourself has sort of seen from the unfair contracts to start with to the turning down the £200 buyout fee for the Wombles and how you made 1 million plus as a result of it. But you've also helped other careers. I mean, you launched Katie Mellier's career with Dramatico. What did you see in her that made you believe she'd be a star?
Well, with Katie, I was actually looking for probably for the first time in my life. I was actually going around looking for someone who could be the singer of my songs. Um, it at a time when it was really more fashionable and preferable by record companies anyway, and to perceive an artist as a singer-songwriter. But here I was as a songwriter who needed a singer because I was, you know, not in the first flush of youth, and I wanted, to find someone who could be literally a vehicle. I'm not saying that's what she turned out to be, but that's what I was looking for. Somebody who could be the acceptable face of Mike Batt songs. In other words, in the way that Burt Bacharach used to work with Dionne Warwick, and very many. It's not a new thing. It's just finding a an acceptably young and cool person, which I say reservedly because I don't think a lot of people think of or thought of Katie as cool, but I maintain that it is and was for different reasons than other people would say it. But she wasn't perceived that way, and because it turned out that the first record we made was incidentally and accidentally similar in style to the kind of Nora Jones alternative, slightly jazz, of certainly not mainstream, and that's what we went for. And how did I find her? Well, I went to several different. I auditioned at several different talent pop music academies, and I couldn't find someone. And I remember Julianne, my wife, saying to me, I had found someone. I wasn't quite sure, and she said, You're not really sure, are you?" And I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Why don't you just keep looking?" And so I made my sort of last call. I thought, okay, and I rang up the Brit School in Croydon, and they said, "Yeah, if you come in a couple of days' time, we'll put an advert. If you send me something to put on the on the notice board, and anyone who wants to audition can." And about 30 kids, and I call them kids because they were all 17, 18, turned up to audition. And I remember Katie was about the sort of 18th person into the room. And I just wrote that she sang a song which of her own on an acoustic guitar. Uh, and I was also, by the way, inspired by Eva Cassidy because she just had a big hit with Somewhere Over the Rainbow,
Right.
which incidentally she had not written. But it was very cool that she did it, and everyone thought she was wonderful, including Katie. So Katie was obviously attracted by the fact that I put on the notice somebody who might be interested in working in the style of Eva Cassidy, and that's what made her think, no, I won't go home quickly on the bus. I'll stay for the audition after school, and that's how we met. And I just wrote down small girl, brown hair, sang own song. And I've still got the bit of paper.
Well,
And
you'll have to dig that out on a future episode. I'd like to see that.
I think that would have been a good album title, actually.
It
Small
still
girl,
can
brown
be.
hair, sang her own song. Well, I of course don't work with her anymore. We had a 10-year relationship, which was fantastic, 6 albums. And she's moved on to different management, different producers, and she's seemingly happy doing that. So, I think 6 albums was probably enough for anybody to make with anybody else. So there you go. But no, I wish her well. And but that was how I met with her. And what you asked me what it was about her that made me think she was a star. Well, it wasn't an immediate thing. It was only a let's could she come along with her parent or guardian and have a chat and play a few more songs, which she did. And then after that, I said, if you come to my other house where I had my studio in the country, um, and we were singing a neutral song, not one of mine, not one of hers. I think it was not Deep Purple. It was one of those kind of older songs. And I remember she went into the recording room, and because I'd said, "Can you try this time?" She'd sung it perfectly. She had absolutely wonderful pitch, innate breath control to die for. I mean, she could sing 3 lines of lyrics without taking a breath. Where not as a sort of circus trick, but just because she didn't feel she needed to, and she glide into the next line, and it was almost awe-inspiring. Is awe-inspiring, and just again to go off at a tangent. A song probably one of the last songs I wrote for her was a song about the Queen. It was commissioned by Buckingham Palace. Queen to honor the Queen and simultaneously my mother, who was the same age. It's called "I Will Be There," and it's funny enough in these days you can have a song like that. It wasn't technically a chart hit. It's on the last album we did, but it's clocked up 41 million views on YouTube. It's quite incredible. But anyway, so but on if anyone wants to see a lesson in breath control, they should dial up "I Will Be There" on YouTube by Katie Melua. It's my song, but she sings it. And my God, those last 3 or 4 lines, she just sings it all on breath, and people go, "Oh my God, did you fake that?" And I said, "No, I just was looking and thinking, oh my God, this is just incredible." And it improved the performance, the fact that she was still holding the air in and letting it out bit by bit. So back to your question, that's one of the special things. She, despite what Amy Winehouse said, she was an absolutely phenomenal singer. Um, much, I'm going to say this, she's a much, much better singer than she is songwriter, right? But that's the only thing I'm going to say about that. It's only a question of degree, and I think she would even own up to that. But she's passionate about songwriting, and so she does it. And I'm not saying she doesn't do it well. I'm just saying, as a singer, she's phenomenally world class. Meanwhile, back at why is she a star? What did I think it was about her? Well, she went into the recording room after she sung the song the first time, perfectly in tune and perfectly well. And I said, and I wanted to find out how she thought, not how she sung. How does she think musically? Could she extemporize? Could she ad lib over a line, but not in the way that I didn't want. Okay, I said to her, look, that line there, from there just into the chorus, can you try doing it, but embellishing it slightly? I won't say what to do. Don't want you to pre-think it, but just sing some kind of jazzy embellishment or bluesy embellishment on it. So she goes into the recording room and she sings something I've never heard any other singer sing. It was an inspired moment. I don't know whether it was born out of panic or what it was, but it was original. And what it wasn't was hashtag number 365 twiddle from the Britain's Got Talent book of how to embellish a tune. It was not that. It wasn't the twiddles that you hear in gospel choirs. It wasn't the twiddles that other singers do. It was a new twiddle. And because she'd invented a brand new twiddle all by herself, I thought that's a mind that can think about how to negotiate a tune. And as a songwriter, one doesn't normally want people to depart from one's tunes. Sometimes people can take great liberties with them. I suppose if it's jazz, anything goes, as the song says. But anyway, that was the moment. I actually burst out laughing. Thankfully, she couldn't hear or see me because we didn't have a glass divide. With my engineer, I just turned to my engineer and started laughing, but not out of any kind of derision or anything. It was just the joy. My God, we found this talent that can do that. It's really unusual. People usually copy styles. Again, I'm going to be completely frank and say I think Amy Winehouse, good though she was a copy. She copied the style of, you know, earlier blues jazz singers from the 60s. Elton John, brilliant though he is, he copies the American redneck accent, that deep South thing, but he does it brilliantly. He used to sing a bit like Jose Feliciano, I think. I always used to sing when he first started, when his voice was tighter and younger. He sounded to me as if he was phrasing like Jose Feliciano. But where Katie differs from those two brilliant other artists is that she doesn't copy anyone. She just sings. She sings what she wants to sing, or we might discuss it. Why don't you try it a bit breathier? Why don't you try it with a bit more push on that? What about I can't hear the consonants? Can you do them another take? But very often she'd be singing with the band. We'd be recording always live with the band. Sometimes we put the vocal on afterwards, but she'd do a guide vocal. And sometimes the guide vocal, we'd just say, well, I can't see how you can improve on that. Let's just use that. And even on the first album, sort of definitely two, maybe three of the vocals are the guide vocal she did while the band was playing live.
Right.
So that's what makes her a star.
Yeah, amazing. Did you ever mention to Amy Winehouse and to Elton John that you felt that they were copying?
No, I would never be so rude. Um, I don't think it's diluted their genius. I think Elton's a brilliant singer. He always has been, and he's a fantastic songwriter, tune writer. And Bernie's a fantastic lyricist. So I'm a fan. I wasn't that much of a fan of Amy, to be honest with you, because I did think she was doing the impression of the 60s. Pre-Motown blues singer, but I still loved a lot of the records she made. But I tell you why it was coloured, and coloured by. I tell you what coloured my opinion, and it just shows me to be a human being. Rather, hopefully people have decided I'm a human being by now. But she hated us. She hated me. And she hated Katie because we were successful. We were from the Brits. Katie was from the Brit school. And I'd come along and started writing the songs, which, yeah, I was writing the majority of the songs, sure. I wrote The Closest Thing to Crazy. I wrote 9 Million Bicycles. And of course, Katie would have hated the fact that this artist who hadn't actually at that point broken was saying, oh, Katie Melua doesn't need to write shit songs. She's got a manager who writes shit songs for her. So after that, it's not surprising that I let's say was less than. But I like to think that don't think that just because someone think you can't help it, can you? And if a critic says you're brilliant, and I've got a few critics who have said that about me, I actually think they're brilliant critics because they've got good opinions, And and I've had a time when everyone dumped on me, bastards, after the Hunting of the Snark came off in the West End. And I think, what, rotten critics? Well, because they thought badly of me. So I think that thing about, I've got to temper my remarks about Amy Winehouse in the knowledge of the fact that she'd already expressed dislike for what we were doing. So it was probably 2/3 that, but there is some validity to what I've said about doing an impression. I'd much rather hear a singer who's singing the way they sing rather than trying to sing the way somebody else sings.
Yeah. And you mentioned about criticism, and so many artists will turn around and say that you can have 99 brilliant reviews, but you focus on the one negative. How do you
Absolutely.
cope with criticism?
Well, I've had a lot of it over the years, and yeah, it still stings. I don't believe anyone who says they don't read their critics. Um, yeah, it's not nice, but sometimes it's useful. If you realize, look back on a gig and think, yeah, they're right. I did do something badly, or I was out of tune on that one, or whatever it was. I don't do that many gigs. I'd like to do a bit more touring, actually. I really enjoy it. I like doing the odd concert, having a little chat with the audience and singing a few songs, or conducting a. In Germany, I've done quite a lot of that because I was bigger as an artist in Germany, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, a little bit in Australia, South Africa, where they did know me as Mike Batt instead of Orinoco.
Extraordinary. We've talked about risks that you've taken, some of which have been very successful, like the not taking the 200 quid, but getting the rights to the Wombles. You mentioned about the 1991 Lewis Carroll, The Hunting of the Snark, which you turned into a West End show. It didn't receive the success you were hoping for. Talk to me about that time, because I think you were famously quoted about saying you were hanging on by the skin of your teeth and facing repossession as a result of that.
Well,
Um,
we were, yeah, yeah. Well, it was. I don't won't go on. Were you going to ask a specific question about that, or was that
Well,
just
I
your?
think it's more how you want to frame that, because a lot of people, as you say, they put their spin on it. Looking back on that creatively, how did you feel about it? And would you have done things different?
Well, it's very. You have to try. You've got to go through a life like mine, without trying not to be bitter about the bad things, and trying not to be hug yourself too much about all the good things. It's a mixture, and you've got to take the good with the bad, and take the blows, slings and arrows, or whatever the expression might be. And at the time, I mean, we'd had quite a lot of success. Well, people who had heard the record loved it. Um, we sold a lot of records in Germany, actually. I think we sold 150,000, which in those days was
No,
pretty good.
phenomenal.
It was platinum in New Zealand, which is perhaps not quite as phenomenal, but it's phenomenal as platinum. But I mean, you only sell 5,000 records. If sheep could buy records, we would have made a fortune because there's so many sheep in New Zealand. But anyway, so we had a successful score, we thought, and there was something. I tell you what it was. I think the critics just went for me. It was because I directed it, and I think the attitude was, who does this record producer think he is? He thinks he can write and orchestrate and design and direct a show. Well, the fact was, I was only motivated to direct it. Hey, I'm motivated as a director anyway. I've always directed stuff, even since when I was 9, doing shows in the garage and inviting people from up the street, you know, uh, and selling a ticket for a penny. I've always been a putter on of shows. But the thing I wanted to put on, associate with the Snark, was this projection system that I'd developed over the years using multiple single shot Kodak carousel cameras, projectors. And we had 200 projectors, and it was all designed all specially. So it would have been very, very difficult for someone to have directed that without having an argument with the projection designer. And as I was the projection designer, I had to pretty much direct it myself so that I could have an argument with myself if I wanted to. Or if I wanted the lighting designer, who was a very distinguished man called Andrew Bridge, uh, wonderful lighting designer, but instead of creeping up as the composer, creeping up to the director and saying, do you think you could ask Andrew to sort of light it a bit darker there because I can't see my projections? all I had to do was say, Andrew, do you mind just turning that little blue light down a bit so the projections can show better? And he'd go, yeah, okay. And he turned it down. Bob's your uncle. It worked. So it all fell together beautifully, technically. Up on day one, no, nothing went wrong. And it, but I do think that the critical community and a certain number of people who are um, influential, should we say, within the within the musicals community, their opinion was you shouldn't direct your own show. And usually that's true, but I believe strongly still now, even in the aftermath of it having been a problem in 1991 for me, it nearly took me down, sadly. Thankfully, rather, it didn't completely take me down. And yeah, so yeah, I felt badly treated by the critics, but we moved on, and I had so many wonderful letters, to the extent that one critic said there was a bloke that did a thesis on the Snark show and the critics. It was called the Snark and the Critics. It was for a theatre studies PhD, I think. And he said something definitely wonky going on with the critics on Mike Batt's show. I don't know why, but it was I think there's a sort of almost like a tribal feeling of how dare this bloke do that. Anyway, you just if you stick your neck out above the parapet, you might sometimes get shot, and I got shot, but you move on.
Well, you say you move on. It still obviously hurts, though, doesn't it, Mike?
It does, and you know what? I've still got. I do believe that that is the central and most pivotal. What's the word? Yeah, the central passion project of my life, and I'm working on a new recording of the all the different versions we've done of it. It had been successful in a costumed symphonic concert in Sydney and Melbourne before we brought it to London. And there's anyone who wants to watch it doesn't know much about it. You can catch it on YouTube. It just have to write my name, so it's Mike Batt, The Hunting of the Snark, Royal Albert Hall, and it pops up the whole.
And it's
Just
brilliant. Absolutely, people should absolutely do that because I think so often people just read the critics and they don't bother. I never ever listen to critics before going to judge a work for myself.
well, I found a lot. Somebody came up to me afterwards and said, we had a no, there was a letter. That's right. A few people came up to me afterwards, but a lot of people did. I mean, in fact, the story I was telling was the fact that one critic um, was answering this PhD guy as to why and the PhD guy said, "Didn't you get a lot of letters?" And she said, "Yeah, but you wonder where these letters are coming from. Obviously, that it's an orchestrated." And I never asked anybody to write in, but absolutely thousands of people did write to quite a lot of other people, including me, saying that it was one of the best things they've ever seen. So I mean, art is art, isn't it? You either don't like it or for various reasons. I've already told you how I was biased against Amy Winehouse, and I'm an ex A&R man who's supposed to be able to spot talent. And it's not that she didn't have talent; it was just that she'd been horrible to me. So maybe it's that, all sorts of reasons for making different opinions about different things, but one does try to be objective. I had dinner with Jack Tinker after he'd shat all over my show. Not the same day. I didn't say, "Oh, thanks for the terrible review. Let's go for dinner." But some months later, we met. We made friends, and he took me to the Ivy to sort of apologise in a way for being quite so vicious. And I didn't let him off the hook. I gave him a few choice but friendly reminders about being detached. He seemed a very nice bloke, but at the time when he tore into my show, he didn't seem quite so nice. So
And
that's
you make an excellent point because so it's easy for the critics and they are asked to sort of turn it up a bit and be a bit more extreme in their criticism. But behind every brush of that pen, there is a human who's put a lot of time and effort and financial, not just emotional, capital into these projects. And some of these critics they can destroy lives, can't they?
yeah. Well, as a journalist, it is actually easier to be funny by being horrible
Yeah.
to somebody. So, I can't think of an example, but well, a couple of the snark critics tried to, make out, oh, what, no, terrible thing happened last night. It was a car crash, whatever it was that they used. But and it was funny, but it was at my expense, but it is easier to be funny when you like and read the old NME in the old days. They used to, but they used to love tearing it. If they were going to tear into someone, they used to have a lot of fun doing it because it's humor that people will sort of latch onto, and it, it it's a lot harder to write anything that's amusing if one is being nice and praising something.
Absolutely. I know a lot of these reality shows that basically depended on humiliating people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but one moves on. Let's put it that way. And you can't be an adventurer. And I do think of myself as adventurous. I am very adventurous. I don't think anybody who either loves me or hates me would disagree with that. They might hate what I do when I do my adventures, but um, they still would agree that I am adventurous. And that's why I work in so many different genres. And it's also why I'm not central to any one genre. So therefore, um, one's progress is sometimes slower but broader across a lot of different areas, and yet punctuated, thankfully, by some really lovely triumphs,
Yeah.
which are what we all live for. And I'm hoping that very soon there'll be another nice big triumph that we can talk retrospectively about and include that in the story as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Mike, we're going to take another little break. But for now, Mike Batt, thank you very much for joining me.
Very nice to talk to you.